Eye on the Storm, Hurricane Season 2019.
And good evening and welcome to Eye on the Storm, your weekly in-depth look at the tropics and how it will impact you. This is week 9 of our show. I'm CBS 17 Chief Meteorologist Wes Hohenstein here in Raleigh, North Carolina. 9 weeks into the hurricane season, and we are just getting into the heart of it. Not even halfway through, but as you know, August is when things really start to get going. We've got a great show for you tonight, as I'll be joined by a veteran reporter out of Norfolk, Virginia, who's been outside in more hurricanes than most of us have even heard of. And we'll also talk with a meteorologist down in Panama City, Florida, which, as you may remember, was ground zero when Hurricane Michael made landfall last year. Ooh, tough stuff down in the Florida Panhandle. During tonight's show, if there is anything you would like to know, any questions you want me to ask our panel, subjects you would like us to talk about in the coming weeks, please check us out on social media. My social media, Facebook, I'm at Weather Wes Hohenstein. Our first guest up in Norfolk, Virginia, Andy Fox. He's Andy Fox Wavy TV. And we'll finish up in the Florida Panhandle with Ross Whitley. He is Whitley Weather. Again, check us out on Facebook. If there are questions you would like to ask us, our digital team is monitoring the email address sendit@cbs17.com. Send it, SENDIT, at CBS17.com. So I'd love to hear from you. Before we get to our panel tonight, let's kind of take a step back and see what's going on in the tropics. You know, it's a week into August, and typically we've got something going on, but we really don't right now. So the places we watch this time of year, we start to keep an eye on the Caribbean, we watch down around the Bahamas, we watch out in the open waters of the Atlantic. And if you just kind of step back and look at it with me, I mean, sure, there's a few clouds in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, down in the Caribbean there's some activity off the southeast coast. Nothing is organized. They're just clouds, maybe even barely some rain. So nothing that we are concerned with right now close to home, and nothing really we're concerned with far away from home. This cluster of clouds has no sense of organizing just outside the Caribbean. And we also start to see waves come off the coast of Africa this time of year. Nothing there. So I think you get my point. There is really nothing that we are concerned with right now. And so far this season, remember, we've only had 2 storms, only one of them since the season has started. If you remember, Andrea, tropical storm happened before the season started. Barry did make it to Category 1 status down in the Gulf of Mexico, but that's 2 storms. We've got a long way to go. We've got a long list of names to get to. If we do see anything start to pop up, and we do not in the next 5 days, nothing expected to get going, Chantal is the next name on our list. So where are we as a season goes, big picture? So the season peaks tropical activity-wise when we see most of the activity the second week of September. So we are just now beginning our journey where things start to ramp up as we look at a graph of tropical activity averaged over through the years. So we are just now getting kind of at the base of the mountain, if you think of it like that. We've got a long way to go before we really start to see things ramp up. And one of the most common questions I get, Wes, are we due this year? Are we going to get something this year? And, you know, when you're months and months away from a possible landfall that could happen in September, October, nobody knows. But I've got a good answer to that question as we take a look at the hurricane return period, the average amount of years a part of your coast, and we've got the whole East Coast, we've got the whole Gulf Coast. The numbers inside each one of these circles are the average number of years between different hurricane strikes. I'm going to break it down for any type of hurricane, category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and major hurricanes. So again, we'll find your spot on the map here, and I'll step aside so you can take a look. But where you see a number is the average number of years in between hurricanes. That's what this map is showing us. And we have data that goes all the way back to 1886. So it's a pretty good sample size. Up in parts of Virginia, 13 to 15 years in between hurricane strikes. For North Carolina, anywhere from 5 to 7 years. We come down here to South Carolina. It's 8 to 9 years in between hurricane landfalls. And this is landfall within 50 miles of that spot. Down in Georgia around Savannah, 10 and 11. Florida's very interesting. As you know, it sticks out there. You got the East Coast side, you got the Gulf side, you got the Panhandle. I mean, it could be anywhere from, I'm seeing 6 to 13 years in between hurricane landfalls, and then we continue over into the Gulf of Mexico. So this is any hurricane. Let's change the numbers to any major hurricane, category 3, 4, or 5, winds above 110 miles an hour. This is really interesting, and I know you guys up in Virginia are happy about this. Anywhere from 44 to 66 years in between major hurricane landfalls. North Carolina, the numbers are a little lower, anywhere between 16 to 25 years in between major hurricane strikes. I spent a lot of time looking at this map. It's just really interesting to see how the numbers vary. Florida Panhandle and the Florida Peninsula, it could be anywhere from 14 years all the way up to 46 years in between major hurricane landfalls. I'm going to post this on social media for you a little later. It's really interesting. You can spend a lot of time having fun and making up scenarios with your area of the world about when hurricanes hit a certain part of the coast. So that's kind of what's going on right now. I want to get into our panel tonight because I'm really excited about who we're going to be talking to. Our first visitor will be from Norfolk, Virginia, and this is a live look at Norfolk, Virginia. We're going to look at a different angle this time around. We visited with our friends at Wavy TV a few months ago when we first started this journey in the Atlantic hurricane season. But tonight I am joined by veteran reporter Andy Fox up in Norfolk. His work has earned him 4 Emmy Awards, a Murrow Award, and he's also had sand in places that he probably doesn't want to talk about. He's been up there covering storms and news since the 1980s. And Andy, I'll just kind of ask you to take a step back. We got a lot we want to ask you, but what comes to mind when you think about all the years you've been covering hurricanes and the big one that has hit that area?
Wes, really intrigued by what you were saying. Those are very interesting statistics. What comes to my mind is how lucky Hampton Roads, where I am right here, and the eastern part of Virginia, Virginia Beach, how lucky we've been that we have not had the big hurricane hit here. Knock on wood. That we have not had that here. We've had, I go back to 1999 when we had basically historic flooding in Floyd. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I'm telling you that we have really been blessed that we have not been hit by the big one, you know, the Cat 3, the Cat 4, the Cat 5. Or anything, 5 would be very difficult. But I was going through our statistics here in Hampton Roads, and I think I've probably covered about somewhere between 30 and 35 hurricanes. In 2004, you know, we're talking about August right now, almost all of the hurricanes that have hit here in Hampton Roads or have impacted us occur in September and August. September and August. In 2004, Wes, we had 5 hurricanes impact Hampton Roads in 2004. As I'm looking at this, that was the worst year we've had. But I've just, you know, we've been lucky, and we continue to hope to be lucky.
Andy, you talked about one of the worst ones that hit your area. 1999, this is the 20th anniversary of that 1-2 punch of right. Dennis and Floyd. Tell us what you remember about that and why that 1-2 punch was so bad.
Oh, it was so terrible because if you remember, Wes, Hurricane Dennis stalled off of the Outer Banks off Hatteras, and that went on for from August 30th to September 4th. I mean, imagine that, just dumping rain, and it also impacted Hampton Roads. It impacted Franklin. So 2 days later, on September 6th, when Floyd comes up the coast and starts to impact, it's already saturated, and so in Franklin, there was nowhere for the water to go, and that's when Franklin flooded. Now, I remember after I had been covering Dennis, when we started covering Floyd, we were down in Wilmington, and then there was a very large cone about where that storm would hit. And so I remember going down to Charleston, and then I remember coming up to Myrtle Beach and coming back to Wilmington, and then coming up 95. The storm passes, Floyd passes, and we're coming up 95, and I remember former Governor Jim Hunt. And I'll get to him, but that 95 was impassable. We could not get north on 95 because Floyd came up, as often happens in North Carolina, and just comes up the middle part of North Carolina and just floods everything. So we had to take back roads to get to Roanoke Rapids, my photographer Rob Rizzo and I, and we ended up spending the night in Roanoke Rapids trying to get back to Hampton Roads. And we remember Jim Hunt, former governor, in a helicopter, and he had a news crew up there, and he was looking down on 95. He says, look at those idiot reporters down there doing their stand-ups. And that turned out to be Rob Rizzo and me. So, and we were watching on a TV in Roanoke Rapids. So I remember that. And then the next day we come in, and I'm pretty well known in this area. And we were coming in on 58, and some lady said, Andy, Franklin is flooded. The storm hit Franklin. We went all the way down, covered all those areas in North Carolina, got the biggest story right there in Franklin. We were the first crew to go live from Franklin, and it was, I think I was reading somewhere, in 500 years, the worst flood, as long back as you can remember. It was the worst flooding ever.
Yeah. You know, a lot of the video clips that we have seen of you, Andy, throughout the years, you're standing on the beach, you're getting whipped around with wind, you got floodwaters from the ocean coming up. I mean, what's that like living through that? I mean, we see only little snippets and we're in the comfort of our homes or studios watching that. What's it like when you're standing out there in the middle of a hurricane?
Well, it's very loud. If you don't know that, it's very loud when you're out there. And so you're trying to think, and you got the wind, you know, coming through, and you got the sand whipping up. And here we are right here. This is at a hotel in North Carolina where we usually go. I have hip waders. I always like to get into the surf because it also gives a point of reference for people to see exactly what's going on. And so we are able to actually go into deeper waters and wade our way through there. Tevas are always good in covering that. I like to wear Tevas. That was before I got the hip waders, or I couldn't find them. And the hip waders just are everything. Wes, covering hurricanes has changed with contracting budgets and everything. We used to do a lot of traveling. I remember going to Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana. I went to a hurricane, I can't remember exactly which one because there were 2 or 3 of them, and it hit Gulf Shores, Alabama. And it tore up Gulf Shores, Alabama. Our local FEMA team went down there, and it was just awful, Wes. And I remember going through Gulf Shores, Alabama, and the beautiful white beaches, and it was just devastation everywhere. And it was still one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, to be walking on the beach in Gulf Shores, Alabama, after this huge hurricane just ripped it all up. But I don't travel so much going to those states, but going to North Carolina and, of course, here in Virginia, there hasn't been a hurricane. I started my career at WITN TV, and an NBC affiliate, a great station in Northeast North Carolina. I remember my first hurricane I covered in my professional career was 1985, September 27th, Gloria. And that was a terrible one for North Carolina. Yeah. And then all the ones since then, I'm counting 30, 35 hurricanes I've covered. Don't hold me to exactly the number, but there have been a lot, as I'm sure you've covered a lot too, Wes.
Yeah, and you know, the stuff that you do is must-see TV, I have to admit, but have you ever felt, I mean, worried? Have you ever felt like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, like your life's in danger?
I've always been torn because I remember being down in Hatteras when they were moving the lighthouse. And I was down there with photographer Rob Rizzo, who I often travel with to cover hurricanes. We are a very good team. And I remember that I was up in the lighthouse, and I was up there with him, and I was laughing. And he said, "What's so funny?" I said, "I've never been here when there have been people." It was the first time when they were moving the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse that I had actually been down on Hatteras Island where there were actually people, and a lot of people. And so usually when people are leaving, we're coming in as the reporting crew, very strong reporting crew, all over the country, especially with Nexstar, dedicated to covering these things. It is dangerous. We always are very cautious, and that's why we never get hurt, because we are cautious. And it really is, Wes, interesting when you look at these terrible, terrible storms that come up the coast, how few tragedies there are with deaths and everything. They're few, but not like, say, in other areas. When we're in North Carolina and Virginia, we've really been blessed with not having a lot of deaths caused by the hurricanes. Of course, any death is terrible, but it really is amazing that with the power of these storms coming through, that everyone's really prepared, and they are waiting, and they are watching, and they see it coming.
Yeah, you share with us a little inside baseball, everyone watching tonight. What's going on when you guys go to commercial break or when you're in between shifts and you're still out there covering a hurricane? I mean, what's happening behind the scenes?
Well, we're all waiting for the cue where we have scripts where we know pretty much when we're going. But if, like, say, when I'm down on Hatteras Island, which is a very tough place to be, by the way, because you don't want to get cut off. I remember being down in Isabel in 2003, and if you remember that hurricane, it cut Highway 12 in half, going down everything in Hatteras Village north was just cut off, and so that was a very difficult one. And you don't want to get stranded down there because you have to report. They're depending on you, and so I always like to go to Hatteras. I like to be Hatteras because you are way out there. If you look at a map, you are the farthest out into the Atlantic, and I like to stay there until the very last minute. But I never get caught down there because it cuts you off. Cell signals down, not able to get out, life packs not working like they should. So we really like to get north to Nags Head, get our stuff down on Hatteras Island, and then come up here. But I've been through so many hurricanes on Hatteras, I can't tell you how many.
Andy, I'll get you out of here on this. Do you ever get tired of this? Do you ever think to yourself, man, I need to go to the Colorado Rockies where they never have hurricanes? No. You ever get tired of it? You ever think that?
No, I never do. If it's going to come here, I want to be covering it. And you never get tired of it because you don't know what's going to happen, Wes. That's the thing. We don't know what's going to happen. And so the mystery is always there. And the desire to cover and to let people know what's going on. Ironically, though, a lot of people that are watching us during hurricanes lose power, and so they aren't seeing us. So that's where internet becomes so important. That is the big changing thing. Social media, getting that out there, listening to local radio stations because they're still operating. But we are constantly monitoring, constantly keeping updated so that our viewers have everything they need to know to weather the storm.
Yep, and he's done it for a long time. That is Andy Fox, one of the best in the business. He takes care of Eastern Virginia, also parts of Eastern North Carolina. He is a busy man during the hurricane season. You can follow him on Twitter, Andy Fox Wavy. Andy, thanks so much for sharing with us tonight. And hopefully, I don't see you the rest of this hurricane season, but I have a feeling we will cross paths yet again.
Wes, if I see you, then I know there's a hurricane out there.
Unfortunately. All right, Andy, take care. Again, that's Andy Fox up in Norfolk, Virginia. We got some new information this week on the outlook for this hurricane season. I just joked with Andy about moving to Colorado to get away from hurricanes, but the best hurricane forecasters in the business reside at Colorado State University, obviously in Colorado. And they issued an update, they do it every month, on the Atlantic 2019 season. So just to kind of recap, an average season for us has 12 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes, category 3, 4, or 5. Their initial forecast before the season started said there were going to be 13 named storms, 5 hurricanes, 2 major. Not exactly average, but pretty darn close. I showed you earlier, we've gone through the A and the B storm. One of them was a hurricane. So the update that Colorado State issued earlier this week has now 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and still 2 major. So a small tweak, but I'd still consider that pretty close to average. And here we are now a week into August, and we have only had 2 named storms. I think they're pretty on track with what's expected to come this season. What about what's going on in the Pacific? Earlier this hurricane season, we had a great conversation with one of our meteorologists in Hawaii about how the Pacific hurricane season works and how the islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean handle hurricanes. So I always like to kind of keep everyone up to date what's going on in the Pacific side. We don't hear a lot about it. And while you see a lot going on in the Intertropical Convergence Zone, nothing's really organized, nothing the National Hurricane Center is watching in the Eastern Pacific. But here's what I really want to show you. We've had 2 storms on the Atlantic side. Look how busy they have been on the Pacific side. They have a different set of names. They've made it all the way through the G name storms. That includes Barbara and Eric, which were both Category 4 hurricanes. So a totally different situation going on in the Pacific, as is usually the case. But I always find it amazing, you know, while we're kind of isolated here in our own world watching the Atlantic side, they've got a whole different set of names and problems and storms to deal with on the Pacific side. And, you know, we had our hands full a lot last year. And now I want to bring in our next guest for tonight's panel. And for that, we go down to that beautiful shot. That is a live look at Panama City, Florida. And joining us now is meteorologist Ross Whitley. And Ross, most of us in our lifetime, we think of Panama City, we think spring break. But after Hurricane Michael hit last year, that's now the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about the Florida Panhandle. Ross, thanks so much for being with us tonight. Take us back to last October and Hurricane Michael.
Yeah, happy to do so. I wish you were coming to Panama City for vacation and not talking about what happened last year. But it is something that does come to mind when you're talking about Panama City now. And there are still beautiful areas, and most of the area is still gorgeous. But talking about Hurricane Michael last year, this is what it looked like the moment of landfall. So if we go back to October 10th of 2018, just a little bit after noontime locally, so that's Central Time, we had Hurricane Michael bearing down on the coastline here, and Panama City just off to the north and west there. This is actually Tyndall Air Force Base. So if you zoomed in all the way through the satellite, you could see through the satellite, through the clear eye, Tyndall Air Force Base and the spiral bands going around the eye wall there that held the intense wind field. And this is what Tyndall Air Force Base looked like after the storm. So you may have heard Tyndall in the news nationally speaking, not just here locally, but that's because this took majority of the brunt. Tyndall and Mexico Beach took the biggest blows when it came to the wind field and the storm, because they were right on the coastline with a Category 5 now storm bearing down on the coast. And if you look at how it's classified, they even mention in the update that made Hurricane Michael a Category 5 that Tyndall and Mexico Beaches were likely the only places to see the 160-mile-per-hour winds. But what we're looking at here is an Air Force hangar, and you see that the metal roof off the Air Force hangar has been completely ripped off, as well as the hangar doors. There was over $1 billion of damage at Tyndall Air Force Base alone from Hurricane Michael. And that's not really the only thing that this storm did. It moved well inland as well. So it wasn't just right along the coastline. This thing was moving at about 14 miles per hour. Once it came on shore, it maintained its strength all the way through the Florida Panhandle. It maintained a Category 4 hurricane. It wasn't classified as a Category 3 hurricane until it got into southwest Georgia. So this is the IR, the infrared satellite, as this storm was making landfall last year in October. And you see it going right over Panama City and then basically straight up Highway 231 here into southwest Georgia. And that's where the most intense storm damage was. If we take a look at the wind field here, we'll even zoom in for you. But what I have shaded here, the white indicating where Category 1 type of wind damage was done, the blue indicating where Category 2 type of wind damage was done, and the red 3, the black 4, and where you see the purple there, that is the Category 5 type of wind damage that was done from Hurricane Michael. So we're going to zoom in and show you exactly where WMBB, that's the station that I am standing in here currently, is located on this map. And it will surprise you just how close Category 5 type of damage came to where the station is. So there's WMBB. That's where we were as this storm was making landfall. And you notice the purple shading here. That's where Cat 5 type of damage, Category 5 type of damage, can be found. And then this is Highway 231. So going all the way up 231, there's Category 4 type of damage. But you also notice something that we don't often talk about as meteorologists, is just how tight these wind fields can be on the western side. And as you go out toward the beach, where really the east end of the beach took a good blow, the west end of the beach really relatively looks rather normal, looks almost the same. So a lot of vacationers come down here and they don't travel down 231 or 77. They actually come down Highway 79 here and they go, what hurricane? There was no hurricane damage here. You see, you go out to the beach, it looks fine. You go out to the hotels and they have no idea unless they come back off to the east, and they cross over that bridge there and come into town, and then they go, whoa, this place really got hit. It's not just here. It goes well inland. It covers multiple counties. Bay County alone, right here, 90 million trees lost in Bay County alone. And then you also can include Calhoun County, Liberty County, as well as Jackson County in all of that damage area. And I told you, Category 4 type of wind damage extended all the way to Donaldsonville, Georgia, where a 115 mile per hour wind gust was recorded at the ASOS station there before they lost power. Many of you guys have seen the before and after photos, but I wanted to take you through a couple here before I toss it back to you, Wes. This is the satellite picture from Mexico Beach before the storm. This is the satellite picture from Mexico Beach after the storm. And you notice that storm damage here was mainly done by storm surge, but you also had 150, 155 mile per hour winds. So there's quite a huge difference between what it looked like before and what it looked like after. How about going into it and looking at it before the storm on Mexico Beach? This is the famous El Governor Hotel out on Mexico Beach. It has been redone. They're rebuilding it, so it looks nice and pretty. But this is before the storm. This is what it looked like after the storm. So storm surge and wind did a part there. You often hear us say that you can hide from wind, you run from water. This is the reason you run from water. When storm surge is threatening your area, you don't risk it, you leave, because you can see here, even all the way up to the 4th floor, that storm surge was responsible for that. How about some side streets in Mexico Beach as well? Before the storm, a beautiful scenic road, if you will, almost storybook-esque. And then after the storm, not so much. Bridge is washed out. A lot of the debris from the coastline also washed out, and that is the canal that they had to re-dredge. And you also notice the trees unmistakably around here in the hurricane damaged areas. The trees still look like that and will probably look like that for decades to come. So that's not just what we're looking at here, but even as we go forward, we're going to be dealing with this storm damage for a long time to come. And I don't know if you guys know this or not. We were talking to Andy Fox earlier. I'm actually a North Carolina boy myself. I grew up just north of Charlotte, so I'm rather familiar with Raleigh and Virginia and all of the hurricanes that he was talking about before, Floyd included in that, 99 in fact. So that takes us back to there as well. So that's Hurricane Michael for you. If you want to ask some questions, let's go back to you, Wes.
So, I mean, that's an amazing map to show that where you are now, you are right on the Category 5, Cat 5 damage line. I mean, tell me what was going on at the station. I mean, was it scary? Was stuff falling around all over you? Did you guys have to evacuate? What was going on?
Yeah, so we were standing, and actually I was right here when the storm was coming in, so I was standing at the Weather Center desk here. And anytime I wasn't on camera, I was basically about as tense as you can be, because we're in this building, and all you could hear in the building, as Andy described earlier, is loud. It was just immensely loud. The building was shaking. We had part of the roof of the building next to us was on top of our roof. We didn't know that, so every time a wind gust came in, it would lift that roof off and then slam it down into the top of our roof. So we would just get the building to shake, and then all of the lights above us would shake, and parts of the ceiling were falling down on top of us. So we had dust and debris basically falling down in the studio, and we were on camera. We were trying to stay calm. We were trying to talk to anybody that was able to watch us at the time and tell them exactly what they could expect. But it was definitely some intense moments, and eventually we were knocked completely off the air. We had the gas line to our generator cut. We had to take shelter in the middle of the station where we thought it would be the safest to be, and we held it out there until we were able to step outside and take a look.
Wow. I did not know that things got that bad there at the station, so I'm glad you guys are back on and with us tonight. I got to ask you, though, Michael hit in October, and, you know, like we talk about a lot, most of the storms that the United States gets happen in August and September. So did you get through those 2 months and think you guys were kind of out of the woods?
Well, funny enough, last year, I mean, I guess it's not funny, but last year we were talking about the season, and myself and at the time Justin, who's now in Knoxville, Tennessee at WATE, another Nexstar station, we believed that October was going to be our month. If we were going to have a storm, it was going to be in October. I don't know if that was coincidental. I don't know if that just means we're really good at our jobs. But we talked about it and we were like, you know what, October I think is the month that we're going to be most concerned with going forward. And so we did get, like you said, we got through September and everything looked okay. As we got toward the end of September and we started looking into October, we saw that there was stuff going on in the Caribbean. We had a gyre out there, and typically as you get into October, stuff that forms in the Caribbean gets into the Gulf. And once it gets into the Gulf, it's anybody's guess where it's going to go. And so we saw that. We actually talked about that producing a hurricane or tropical system for probably about a week and a half before Michael's started, which I think was PTC, so Potential Tropical Cyclone 14, was what it started as. When that formed, the models nailed it. It hit it perfectly on the head that it was coming to the Panhandle, and they never wavered. So we knew that we were going to be hit, and we were probably going to be hit pretty hard. It probably wasn't until about, I would say, 60 hours out that we had a grasp of exactly how hard that was going to be. But every passing hour after that, it was like, okay, we're in this now.
Right.
This is what we need to do, and this is how we need to handle it.
Right. Michael was the first Cat 5 since 1992 and Andrew to hit the United States. I mean, do you remember the moment or the day where you knew this was going to be bad for the area?
Yeah. We talked. We have every station has a meeting that happens before newscast. You do it early in the day, and
right.
then you have another one before the late night. We talked the 2 days before. I sat down and talked to the news staff, and I said, told all of the reporters, all of our staff here, I said, imagine the worst thing that you can imagine, and then double that, and that's what we're going to experience. This is going to be something that forever changes our landscape, that forever changes our coastline, and will forever change this area. And they all kind of looked at me as typically what happens in our rather comical news meetings. They kind of scoffed, and some of them were taking it serious. Some of them were like, yeah, okay, we'll see how it goes, and things like that. But that's what we said 2 days before. So that was the moment that I knew that this was going to be really, really bad. I think that that's the curse and the blessing of being a meteorologist is we have an idea of exactly what storms can do, and then our challenge is taking that idea and painting a picture vivid enough for viewers to understand that we make this picture a reality to them and say, hey, this is the possibility when this storm comes in, because we already know that. We know what 140, 150 mile per hour winds is going to do, but imagining that is next to impossible.
Yeah. Ross, I'll get you out of here on this one, but 10 months it's been since the storm hit. I mean, is life back to normal? Do you still drive around and see a lot of damage? What's going on there now?
Yeah, I would say for the day-to-day, life is back to normal. A lot of people in the area have had a heck of a time dealing with insurance companies. So buildings and getting houses and things like that back to where they were pre-storm, that hasn't happened yet. There's a lot of parts of the area that you can drive through, and it looks like October 11th. It looks like the day after Hurricane Michael came in. You drive through and you're like, nothing's changed since the day after this storm happened. And the forest, the forest is going to take 15, maybe 20 years to recover, because there's plenty of areas that look like, that the day after the storm, like I just said. And because of that, you notice it. It's not something that goes away when you're driving around downtown. If you drove through the area where the eye wall went, I just did it the other day. If you drive from I-10 all the way down into Panama City, the entire time your jaw will be on the floor. You'll just be looking around going, wow, like the forest is gone. This looks like somebody dropped a bomb. Like, what happened here? You know, if living here, you become a little blind to it, and you move on with life, and this area is going to recover, and we're going to be bigger, better, and stronger than ever after the storm, but it's definitely something that we're dealing with. I don't like the term new normal, but that's what we're going through, is we have a different type of normalcy here, and I think people are coping with it pretty well, but it's going to take a long time to recover.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. You know, for having nothing going on in the tropics right now, just some really amazing stories. Ross, thanks so much for spending time. And yes, I do hope we get down there to vacation. Maybe I'll have everyone, you can share your home address and we can just maybe snuggle up with you when we stay, maybe?
I've got one extra room, man. You're welcome to come stay, but I can take about one extra person.
We'll do that offline so you don't have hundreds of people showing up. But next time you find yourself in Panama City, Ross works at WMBB. He is taking care of the Florida Panhandle down there, one of our many Nexstar stations along the Gulf Coast and the East Coast. Ross, good to spend some time with you tonight, and thank you for spending time with us at home. We talked to Andy up in Norfolk. We talked to Ross down in Florida. Some great stuff tonight, and we are here every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. Hope to see you again on a Wednesday night right here on Eye of the Storm. Have a great evening.